Angela Merkel's designated successor says she won't run for the German chancellorship. Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer also plans to step down as leader of the governing CDU. Those surprise announcements come after its regional politicians defied a ban on cooperating with the far-right party, the AfD. So, what's fueling the CDU's divisions, and can it survive without Merkel? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. Angela Merkel has governed Germany for almost 15 years, but the Chancellor isn't willing to stay for much longer, saying she won't run for re-election in 2021. The question over who will succeed her is again challenging the CDU, her party. Its leader, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, was supposed to run for the top job, but has announced that she's stepping aside. That came after CDU members voted alongside the far-right AfD party in a regional election. The shock move has raised questions over divisions within the party and its impact on Germany's politics. We'll discuss all of that with our guests in just a moment, but first, Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane reports.
Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer was supposed to be her party's political future. Soon she will belong to its past. Her hopes of being her country's second female chancellor dashed by a row over how her party deals with the far right.
I'm the party leader and I'll remain in this position for the foreseeable future. What I've said is that I will not run for chancellor, but other than that, the situation hasn't changed.
But the situation certainly has changed, and it was this moment that brought her down, when Christian Democrats joined forces with the far-right AfD to elect a liberal prime minister in the state of Thuringia, thereby ousting a popular far-left government and breaking a taboo which has stood virtually since the AfD began life 7 years ago, prompting protesters onto the streets in that state and drawing denunciations from all the main political parties. Many accused Kramp-Karrenbauer of a lack of leadership, accusations which had dogged her since her election as head of her party in 2018.
But it was perhaps the reaction of Angela Merkel which made Kramp-Karrenbauer's decision inevitable. Late last week, she called what took place in Thuringia unforgivable. Here in Berlin on Monday, she was in more conciliatory mood.
I regard this decision with great respect, though I greatly regret it. I can imagine this wasn't an easy decision for her, and I thank her for being prepared to stay on to steer the process of choosing a successor.
For some Christian Democrats, this is the person to choose. Friedrich Merz, once on friendly terms with Merkel, but who she sidelined many years ago. He fought his way back from the political wilderness and ran Kramp-Karrenbauer close in the leadership election of 2018.
Whoever actually will succeed, AKK, has to make a decision, either as she tried to do so, to bridge that gap, or to lead the way in one of the two camps and directions, either the Merkel direction for a more moderate liberal course, or actually for the Friedrich Merz direction to become much more conservative than they had been before.
And then there is the question of what to do about the AfD. In the federal parliament, their numbers are too small to be more than an irritant to the mainstream parties. But out in the state parliaments, particularly in the east, they are much more numerous, and now they are raising their voice. Many Germans are deeply worried by what they're hearing. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
So let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Berlin, we're joined by Ulrich Brueckner, who's a political analyst and professor in European Studies at Stanford University in Berlin. Via Skype from Strasbourg, we're joined by Hannah Neumann, member of the European Parliament for the German Greens. And also in Berlin, Mona El Omari, activist and project coordinator for the Regional Centre for Education, Integration and Democracy, a Berlin-based non-governmental organisation. Welcome to Inside Story, all of you. Ulrich, let's start with you. When did it start to and why has it gone so wrong for Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer?
Well, if you try to become the successor of a party leader and a chancellor who was elected in 2005, which means now 15 years of being in power, then walking in her footsteps is quite something. And there has been no discussion about who could succeed Merkel. and in what direction things should go. So coming from the small part of Germany, which is Saarland, where she was governor, coming to Berlin and being in the shark basin that the CDU and the political Berlin is, I think it has been difficult right from the start, and not only last week when things got really messy with the elections in the small state of Thuringia in the east of Germany.
She's made various missteps along the way too, hasn't she?
Yeah, it was a rocky beginning and it kept being complicated. She announced from the start that it's perfectly fine for her to move from being a governor to the head of the Christian Democratic Union, something Merkel was always insisting on, that this division of power, being the head of the executive as the Chancellor, and at the same time the head of the biggest party in the German parliament, is of utmost importance to hold control in what has to be put together if you are the head of a party that considers itself to be a people's party, which means that there are very different political opinions represented in this party, and it needs a strong leadership to hold it together, not to speak of potential crown princesses and princes that rather would like to see Merkel's era to end earlier than 15 or potentially 16 years.
Hannah, what's your view on that? To what extent has the separation of the role of Chancellor and the party leadership weakened the CDU, and how has it benefited your party?
Well, that is two questions in one. I think, first of all, it has been quite a new thing for the CDU to have this division between party leadership and the Chancellery. And it has been problematic a few times, but I think we have seen the big problematic and how problematic it is right in the last few days. Angela Merkel, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer tried to sort out the situation in Thüringen, and she didn't manage for 2 or 3 days. And then Angela Merkel came back from her travel to Africa. She made a few key decisions and kind of going on top of Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. And that's how she sorted it out. And that made Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer look even weaker than she looked before, and maybe weakened her and kind of pushed her over the cliff. Your other question was, what does it mean for us as the Greens? I think right now is not the moment to discuss about what it means for one party or another, or which party could benefit and which one may lose, because I think we're in a very difficult and tense situation for Germany and German democracy. And what counts at the moment is that all democratic parties stand together and make very clear that being tolerated or even cooperating with right-wing parties, especially the AfD, is not an option for anyone in Germany. And I think that is what counts. And what this may mean for one party or another is something we will have to see maybe at the next election, but it's not what concerns us, and also not what concerns us as Greens at the moment.
Mona, a delicate and difficult time for Germany. Hannah was saying just there, the AfD was quick to hail Kramp-Karrenbauer's resignation as a victory. Is it safe to say that the AfD has ousted the leader of the CDU?
I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say that the AfD has actively ousted Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, but I would say that obviously the way that the AfD acts, and that other parties that consider themselves center or even center-right parties, they are basically dancing to the AfD's drum in a way, and they have been for quite some time, because they are really concerned with winning back voters that they have lost to the AfD. They are really concerned with staying in power rather than looking towards the left, maybe for solutions of working together, for approaches of working together. Because in Germany, one of the big arguments in the political discourse at the moment is this horseshoe theory argument that kind of states that the far left is equally as bad as the far right, and everybody would do well to stay in the center, claiming that the center is neutral and democratic, which is it not to begin with, but also which is really dangerous. And I think we've seen the effects of this theory playing itself out really strongly with the whole political discourse shifting towards the right, the AfD gaining more and more power all over Germany. They are now a party that is in every single parliament, in every single state in Germany. And I think a lot of people are kind of fearfully waiting for the AfD to actually become even more powerful in the German Bundestag. So yeah, it's a very worrisome development.
Hannah, at a local level, there's increasing pressure on CDU politicians to cooperate with the AfD. The AfD argues that not doing so ignores the will of the people. They've got a point, haven't they?
Well, we have to differentiate between the AfD, meaning the people who are sitting in the parliament for the right-wing party, and especially in Thüringen, which is the county we are talking about. They are not democratic at all. They are super right-wing. They are about the far righters that we've seen among AfD in the country. Or if we are talking about the people who are actually voting for the AfD. And I think what we should all do, and most of the big parties have realized that, is to talk to the people who actually gave their votes to the AfD, to talk about their concerns. Some of them are actually rightful, to see how we can address them, how we can engage them back into a democratic discussion. This is something we should do, but we should be very, very clear with regards to right-wing people who do not share our democratic understanding on which this democracy is built. That is, we are clearly against racism. That is, we are clearly against the exclusion of minorities. And we have a historical legacy that we accept and that forms part of our culture. And here, I think we need to be very clear in whom we are talking to, whom we need to engage with. That is the people in the counties, and whom we are opposing and fighting against. And this is the politicians that deny these fundamental rights, for example.
Ulrich, what happens to the CDU now? In which direction does it head? Will it stay a centre-right party? Will it become more conservative? Can it even survive this period of turmoil intact?
I don't think that anyone can currently predict in which direction it will move. We believe in a pluralist system. This is the decision of the members of the Christian Democratic Union and not something like a declaration from whoever is currently in power. The CDU has to get its act together and decide what they want to be. During the 15 years of Merkel's leadership, it moved from a conservative party to a centrist party because the German public is not as divided as in many polarized political systems where the two extreme poles don't even speak to each other. In Germany, we still have a strong middle class and you win elections in the center. That was strategically a smart move by Merkel, but the price they pay is that the right edge of the political spectrum does not feel represented, and there are growing forces within the CDU and also their sister party in Bavaria that want to move the party further to the right. But this is an open debate within the party, and it's also a strategic choice that is very hard to predict.
So to what extent was Kramp-Karrenbauer's announcement that she's going to step down as much a defeat for Angela Merkel and her worldview of her, if you like, her policies, as it was for Kramp-Karrenbauer?
Well, I don't think the blame is on Merkel, because if there is no one for many years who is potentially seen as a successor that has the reputation and the strength and the leadership skills to follow her, then choosing whoever is currently considered to be a potential candidate looks way smaller or only acceptable for a certain wing within the party. And that is the strategic choice. You can either go for something to continue with Merkel's legacy, or you can move further right. But that is a very tough choice. You can, of course, win back voters that are disappointed by the centrist move of the party and move the party further right. But that makes it much more complicated for a potential scenario to join forces with a Green and to continue with a Green and CDU government in the future, which is a likely scenario after playing with this idea on a regional level.
Okay, so Hannah, What about the Grand Coalition? Will elections still happen when they're scheduled to next year, or are we going to see an election at a federal level before that? To what extent is democracy in Germany right now being tested?
This is one of the main questions that we have to see, to what extent we will have elections next year scheduled or now. The plan of Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer is to find processes until summer on how they will choose their lead candidate that will then be elected in December. And that would mean we might have elections just like the regular one end of next year. I'm just not sure to what extent this can work, because already in the last 2 or 3 days since her announcement, we have seen these different groups in the CDU having debates, one going strong over the other. And I'm not sure whether we can stay in this vacuum for until December, which is another 11 months.
Hannah, I mean,
so I'm afraid you might...
Hannah, your party's in a pretty strong position federally, isn't it, in Germany at the moment? I'd have thought that you'd be clamouring for an early election.
Well, as I said, at the moment, we are more worried about democracy in Germany than we are celebrating our potential victory in some potential election. And it's also not, there's no guarantee if we have elections now that the Greens will come in strong and that the AfD may just win more. That's one of the dangers we see. The other danger is Germany is actually taking over the European Union Council presidency, is supposed to take it over in summer. And there are main decisions that need to be made. One is, how do we go on with UK after the Brexit? And here final decisions have to be made until the end of the year, as well as the 7 years budget of the European Union. And as of now, everyone has counted on a strong German EU presidency to take care of that and to put the European Union to safe waters. That is also in danger at the moment. And as someone who is concerned about democracy and about the strong European Union, I have to be frank, new elections don't sound like something great to me.
Mona, how should the bigger, more established parties deal with the rise of the far right in Germany? How do they neutralise them as an electoral threat? I mean, can it even be done?
To be quite honest, I'm not sure whether it can be done, even though I would have very strong recommendations, I think, on how to deal with them. And my very first recommendation would be to maybe get into processes of seeing whether or not the AfD could be prohibited as a party, which would be not a step to address the problem in its totality, but more to deal with it in the short to medium term duration or time. But I think one thing that is not being mentioned in this whole discussion, I think which is really important to mention, is maybe to not, to worry about the development in the far right, in fascist tendencies, neo-Nazi tendencies within the AfD. But also, I think, on the other hand, it is really important to strengthen the communities and social society groups that are being targeted by AfD, and to see how these communities could be supported and strengthened. And I think we're always talking, we're quick to talk about how to get people to vote for CDU or SPD or other so-called central parties again after they've run off and joined the AfD or voted for the AfD. What I'm missing here is an interest or a focus on people who are actually targeted by the AfD, by parties that are similar to the AfD, and who have also been targeted, to be really frank, by policies put forth by the CDU and the SPD as well.
Ulrich, in Switzerland, Poland and Hungary, you've got nationalists and populists in power, the far right on the rise in Italy, in Spain, in France, in the Netherlands. Is it only a matter of time before the AfD becomes a major political force in Germany? Is their holding power of some sort, at least regionally, more or less inevitable?
It's not written in the book of fate that populists succeed. And given the German history, we come from a totalitarian past. We are much more sensitive for everything that is anti-democratic, anti-institutional, highlighting the importance of a person over institutional processes and a political culture. What the AfD tried to achieve is to disgrace politicians and focus much more on personnel than on content, because they don't really have much to offer. If they would have something to offer, they could be part of a democratic discourse, which they are not, because they are destructive. They instrumentalize institutions for a farce like in Thuringia, and it was a great victory for them to see AKK stepping down. But the actual goal is to get rid of Merkel. This was always the slogan from 2015 on, when they hated her for being a humanitarian face of Germany that gives a helping hand to people in need. And that was Merkel must go. So what the central parties, the democratic parties, must do is to unmask what a party that is xenophobic, racist, anti-democratic, anti-institutional, and a lot of things that we have experienced in the most worst cases in Germany, what they stand for and what they want.
Okay. Hannah, I need a fairly brief answer from you, because we're rapidly coming towards the end of the programme here. You touched upon it in your last answer. What does all of this mean for Europe, coming, as you said, at a time when the bloc is looking to Germany for leadership in a post-Brexit world?
Well, it means, at the moment, it means more troubled waters for Europe. And I just hope that CDU will quickly sort it out in a way that Germany can be the strong EU presidency that everybody needs it to be. If it can't, well, that we will have to see. But I think then we are seeing very, very challenging times, and lots of the decisions being postponed for another 6 months, which I really think we should avoid at the moment.
And Mona, we talk about all of this this turmoil affecting the CDU. The CDU is not the only party affecting this kind of turbulence or experiencing this kind of turbulence at the moment in Germany. To what extent is all of this a generational issue, in that the established parties, the large established parties in Germany, just simply haven't moved with the times?
I'm really glad that you're asking this question, because I think what becomes kind of ignored or masked or veiled in this whole discussion is that we're talking about the political situation in Germany as if there had always been like this democratic consensus that everybody had, and now all of a sudden the AfD comes into the game and starts this turmoil, this kind of development, where I think I would highly doubt this narrative that also Ulrich touched on early on, of Germany being super sensitive towards totalitarian or fascist tendencies within politics. I would much rather say that this type of sensitivity has always been more performative rather than actually transformative in the way that politics and parties and societal structures and relationships are organized. So I'm not actually thinking that we are in a time that could be called tumultuous, but it also, to me, it feels like a very not to say natural, but a very, very clear and rational consequence of the developments that have been ignored for decades past.
Okay. Ulrich, 30 seconds I have left here. If there were to be a national election tomorrow, who would win? Would Hannah's party be in power at the head of some sort of grand coalition? I mean, electorally, at least nationally, the AfD aren't really a threat at the moment, are they?
Well, at the moment, it looks very much like those who understand that climate change is the priority of the time will win. The FDP, with their leader Lindner, managed to be moved back on stage again and might be moved out again. I don't think that the AfD will win from the whole mess, and the Social Democrats suffered so much last year from their own problems that it's quite unlikely that they would benefit from it. So yes, that is what the situation is today, but it can change any time.
There we have to leave it. Many thanks indeed to all of you, Ulrich Brueckner, Hannah Neumann and Mona El Omari. And thank you for watching. Don't forget you can see this programme again at any time just by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us at our Facebook page. You'll find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.